Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another live stream. So today we're going to delve into a question that was posed in a comment, and it's around the question of, when do you stop stacking silver? Is there a scenario in which our bullish outlook for silver should be called into question? I'm going to go ahead and read the comment to you here. And the reason I wanted to address this is because this was not an isolated comment. I've had a lot of questions in this vein, and so I figured it'd be worth doing a whole video on it. Here's the question. It was from James, who said, will there ever be a time when you're convinced that silver is not, quote, going to the moon, unquote, i.e., hundreds of dollars per ounce, as we've been hearing for so many years? Or are your fingers permanently crossed? Well, thanks for the question, James. And I will say that, 100%, there are scenarios that would lead me to have a less bullish outlook on the precious metals and especially on silver. So we're going to delve into some of those. And first of all, I just want to say a apology to anybody who tuned into yesterday's live stream. I saw some other comments. You might have heard an F-bomb dropped. Kind of a hot mic situation. YouTube will do this thing where it continues to broadcast audio after you end a live stream. And at the end of yesterday's live stream, my cat managed to get into the pantry and begin ripping open a bag of cat food. And I assure you, my cat is well fed. She's just a glutton. So if you heard that, I wasn't directed at any of you. That was directed at my feline friend. But anyway, sorry about that. If you did hear that, we usually try to keep this show family friendly. And let's get right into when I would consider silver's prospects to not be so bright. The first one would be regarding the U.S. national debt, which currently sits at just under $34.5 trillion. So if the U.S. national debt began to be managed in a responsible way, if our leaders were to, say, cut entitlement programs, cut spending, drastically cut budgets, run a surplus, raise taxes, impose austerity, and begin driving down the national debt, then I would no longer think that silver had such a bright future. However, considering the fact that according to the most recent reports, it's just math. I mean, it's not even reports. The debt has been increasing by $1 trillion every 100 days. So as long as that trend remains in effect, I will remain incredibly bullish on silver, to answer your question, James. And I'm not a permabull. I don't believe that silver is always something that you should be loading up on. But when you live in a time when deficits are exploding at an exponential rate, and these are debts that ultimately there's not even enough wealth to tax to pay them off and to cover these deficits, the debt's going to have to be monetized, and it means the debasement of the dollar is around the corner. Also, we do have a sponsor for today's video. If you want to start stacking some silver, if you're just getting into it, make sure you check out sdbullion.com/new, where you can get gold or silver at spot on your first order. Also, I buy my gold and silver there. They got some pretty low premiums right now. Good service, competitive pricing. So anyway, check them out if you're looking to stack some silver, because again, the debt is not going anywhere. The second thing that would make me consider silver's prospects not so bright would be if we were to see the weaponization of the US dollar come to an end, because there is no doubt the US dollar, especially in the past 2 years, has been incredibly weaponized, right? We've had sanctions imposed on Russia, the likes of which we've never seen in our lifetimes. They've seized billions of dollars of assets. So we're sending the message around the world that, if you don't stay on our good side in terms of the geopolitical arena, your dollar assets may be forfeit, and that is leading to a trend of global de-dollarization. That's the reason that yesterday, very likely, we got that announcement from the TASS, Russian news agency, about a Russian and BRICS blockchain-based currency system, payment system, which is designed to circumvent the dollar. It's one that might actually be backed up by gold, believe it or not. And where gold goes, silver will follow. And therefore, I view this as a trend that is incredibly bullish for silver. It's not so good for the US dollar. But look at this most recent development from yesterday. Headline from Reuters: top US officials warns Austria over banking with Russia. So this is not a trend which is changing anytime soon. In fact, we are doubling down on it. Austria has a relatively close banking relationship with Russia, I suppose. I'm not super familiar with their banking system over there, but here's a quote about how our representative will speak about a new U.S. sanctions authority that heightened risk for banks and encouraged them to protect themselves from trade related to Russia's military industrial base or risk being cut off from the U.S. financial system. So if you should make the wrong step geopolitically, if you do business with the wrong companies, with the wrong entities, you risk being cut off completely from the US financial system right now. So clearly, that is not a selling point for the US dollar. This is going to lead to more de-dollarization. And again, this is a trend which is it's going in the wrong direction for the dollar. And so as long as that trend remains in effect, I'm going to be bullish on gold and silver, dollar alternatives, because it's not so much that gold and silver will go up, it's that the dollar is going to get creamed as we continue to run up these enormous debts. For the past 50 years or so, we've counted on the rest of the world to buy up our debt. Well, when you weaponize your financial system, it makes that seem a lot less appealing. It's not so appealing to hold the debt instruments of a country that at any time could cut you out of its financial system. And do me a favor, we've got about 116 people in the live stream. We got 17 likes. I think we can do better than that. Let's smash that like button so that people can know, some of the things to look out for to become more bearish in regards to silver. How about if the U.S. stops sponsoring proxy wars around the world and getting drawn deeper into these conflicts? We've got most recently here from Newsweek, NATO will be drawn into war with Russia if Ukraine loses. This is according to Lloyd Austin, the highest defense official in the United States. So you tell me, does it look like we are de-escalating conflicts around the world? Conflicts which, by the way, lead to billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of borrowing, increasing the deficits. There's no way you can bring down the deficits when you're at war in multiple theaters around the world. Nothing creates debt like war. You've got to understand that. Nothing is more inflationary than war. It is a huge sink for government spending. And a lot of people get wealthy on that, but not you or me. And what ends up happening is all of this war spending is financed via inflation, the hidden tax of inflation. Because if they actually told you how much these things cost and they tried to tax you sufficiently, you'd have revolution in the street tomorrow. But instead, everybody gets taxed by inflation. So, we've had decades of war, trillions of dollars poured into the military industrial complex. Now, the price of food, the price of housing, the price of insurance, the price of labor, everything is skyrocketing. It is the predictable result. And then you get the crash, inevitably you get the crash. Like World War I led to a huge bubble in the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties, from the giant expansion of credit, which is the same thing as inflation, basically. And how did that all wind up? Well, you know what happened at the end of the 1920s, and then we got the Depression. So, look, you want to be in hard assets as we continue to pour billions of borrowed dollars into conflicts around the world. We also had this today: at least 3 killed on shipping vessel in first fatal Houthi attack since the start of the Israeli-Hamas war. So it's not just escalations in Ukraine. It's not just the threat of NATO troops operating on Ukraine soil from the U.S. Secretary of Defense. Now we have the first casualties of these Houthi attacks that, despite the fact that we have launched hundreds of airstrikes into Yemen, to the tune of hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of munitions expended, they can't seem to get these attacks to stop. So it's further escalation on multiple fronts. This is going to lead to massive inflation. This is going to lead to a lot more borrowing. So right back to why gold and silver, and silver is super cheap. Let's talk about that. I will stop stacking silver and I might start stacking gold if this number comes down. This is the gold to silver ratio, but right now it's still at 88.54. very high historically. If you look at the average from the 20th century, it's a number far lower than that. And, if you look at this chart, this just goes back to the 90s, but you can see that we're at the very high end of this. And remember, when this chart is up, or when this number is up, the gold to silver ratio, it means that silver is cheap relative to gold. Now, I got River Pike in the chat here saying how much silver is enough. Well, look, I mean, there's no amount of silver that's right for everybody. It's all going to be dependent on your own personal situation. Don't take any of this as financial advice because look, I mean, silver is not for everybody. I think you got to get out of high interest debt before you get into hard assets. You should have some cash so you don't become a weak hand. You don't want to have to sell at the wrong time. And again, this isn't even advice. This is just how I approach it. But there's no right amount. But I think that any amount of silver is good because you have a small stack. I mean, what you're looking at right now, this amount of silver, if you have this, you're ahead of the vast majority of Americans. You've got more hard assets than most. I don't know exactly the statistics. Ownership of physical metal is not really like a transparent market, but most do not have bullion in any capacity. So, every coin you put away stacks the odds in your favor. And it's not just silver being cheap relative to gold that makes me want to stack silver. Look at the Dow to silver ratio. So this is silver's relative value to the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And you can see that right now, paper assets, stocks, we're at the very high end. Remember, when this goes up, it means silver's cheap. I mean, look at where it was in 2011. Now, there's 1980, of course, but I know people will jump up and down and say, that was all the Hunt brothers. Oh, there's a lot going on in 1980. In fact, if you look at the Dow to gold ratio, you also see a spike down there. So it's not just the Hunt brothers. But even in 2011, you had a significant decline in the Dow to silver ratio. So look, when you see this ratio plummet, then maybe it's time to get out of silver and get into some other assets that might be more undervalued at that time. Maybe when the gold to silver ratio drops, you get out of silver and you move into gold. But until this scenario changes, this scenario where we are just borrowing huge amounts of money and the economy is being hollowed out by central planning. Ninja TV says, what if wartime kicked in and silver was demanded for a war? Takes about a monster box to build a missile. I'm not sure about that. I hear a lot of people say that, cruise missile has like 500 ounces of silver. I'm a little skeptical of that statistic, but, it will be consumed. And that's the thing about war. It doesn't matter if it's silver that you're consuming and destroying. You're taking valuable, scarce resources and you're blowing things up with them. You're not adding anything to the economy. That's why it's so inflationary, because you pour all this money into it and all that comes out is death and destruction. So it's really just a sink for wealth. War does destroy wealth. All those people out there who say, oh, war's good for the economy. Yeah, that's BS. Maybe it's good if the rest of the world blows itself up and you finance the reconstruction, kind of a unique scenario. But in general, war hurts everybody. It's a destroyer of wealth, and you can expect more of it as we move forward. And until that trend changes, I'll continue stacking silver. So that's pretty much it for today. I mean, I just wanted to address that question because people will say, you're a perma-bull. Is there any time you wouldn't buy silver? And yeah, there's lots of times. But right now, silver is the most undervalued asset on the planet. The fundamentals are incredibly strong, and I think it's more important than ever before to have insurance against a massive debt or currency crisis, an event which, if you ask me, is probably right around the corner. But don't take that as financial advice. I'm just telling you my views on things because that was what James asked. Are there times when I would think silver wasn't going to go up? And yeah, there are. But look, I don't have my fingers crossed that silver's going to go higher. Until this scenario changes, it's basically inevitable. I mean, I can't tell you when it's going to happen, but there will come a time when investors realize what's going on here, and there's going to be a flight to safety, and there's not very much of this stuff to go around. So again, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Stay safe and happy stacking, everybody, and I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker, out.